Sarge 56, Happy New Year, Bill. Happy New Year, Sarge, and all the rest of you. Are the Dems going to cave on the wall? What is their plan going to be, and can the Senate live with it? I don't know. Um, Steve Darrow says Hillary's a KFC meal. Has one left wing and two fat thighs. Well played, Steve. Um, Sarge, I don't see any. This is me, since you asked. I don't see any hope for the wall. The wall had to be built in the first 2 years. It had to be built within the. It had to be started within the first 100 days. Ann Coulter was Trump's biggest supporter. She's turned into his biggest critic. I don't oscillate quite as widely as she does. But she did make an interesting point when she said that Trump ran on the wall. Every single campaign speech was about immigration and the wall. And she said if you became president, Trump should have been, maybe not on the first day, but on day 2, he should have been down at the border supervising the building of the wall. I think she's actually got a really good point. You had 2 years, and I've been saying it from election night. Once it became clear that we had the House, the Senate, and the presidency, it's now or never. And it turned out it was never. Now, part of that, I think a significant part of that is Donald Trump not forcing it through. And he seems to have dropped the ball on that. But the main culprits are the so-called Republican congressmen who had talked about things like, oh yeah, we love the wall, and talked about things like, oh, Obamacare, the second that we get a Republican president, we're gonna repeal it. And the second we got a Republican president, they all chickened out. They didn't want to face the consequences of it. They're just absolutely gutless. That first, this last Congress, the Congress that just ended, was the most disappointing bunch of cowards that I've ever seen. We remember Barack Obama when he was elected. He also had the House and the Senate behind him, and in those 2 years, the Democrats did everything. They did Obamacare. They did everything that they wanted. And I knew that we were going to have a very small amount of time. And by the time we were 1 year into Trump's presidency, I realized this isn't going to happen. There's some talk about the lame duck Congress now, that they don't have to worry about re-election, that they'll vote it in and stuff. But if that happens, it'll just get voted away. It seems to me that if you're going to go to the wall and shut down the government about the wall, the time to do that is not after you've lost the House and the source of funding. The time to do that is on day 2 of your presidency. It's day 2. Let's get this thing going. Well, we don't know about the funds. Well, it's a Republican Congress, so you would have a lot of leverage if you're Donald Trump in that case. You basically say, hey, look, the American people sent me to Washington to do 2 things. One of them is build a wall, and the other one's drain the swamp. So let's start with the wall. And why won't you vote for this, Senator or Congressman so-and-so from the X district of Y state? Why aren't you backing this? And just, applied some political pressure. I think Donald Trump's weakness in this regard is a weakness that many people saw coming. And that is, as a businessman, he gets to give orders. But the president doesn't get to order the Congress around. He doesn't just get to order it. Politics is different than business. He can't just fire congressmen. I don't want the president to have that much power. Needless to say, I think a lot of Republican congressmen needed to be fired. It turned out they were fired. But you can't just go in there and say, okay, start building. You've got to persuade people. You've got to have enough political skill to strong arm people into doing what you think needs to be done. And the way you reach a politician is through his re-election. We've said this 100 times. The Democrats' best minds go into politics, and our politicians are our 3rd or 4th rate team. Most conservatives go into business and make a living. and don't really want to control other people's lives and do nothing but write laws for them. It'd be very, very, very difficult to find a Congress made up of people who went to Washington in order to destroy power, because the people who would be willing to destroy power, which is what I would do, I'd go to Washington, I'd just disassemble as much as I could. But the reason that this is not likely to happen is because in order to run for political office, you have to have that fire in the belly. It's an unpleasant, dreadful experience. It's made that way on purpose. And so the only people that actually survive as politicians are people who want to be politicians so badly that they're willing to put up with the process. People talk about term limits. I've been talking for one time about term limits, and I say, one term, that's it. So what's so hard about it? But really, when you get right down to it, you still can't solve the only people that shouldn't be politicians are the ones that are running. And that makes me think, I don't really think I would have a problem with something like the way juries are selected. I wouldn't want to be tried by a professional jury, let's put it that way. If you could get a job as a professional jurist and all you did was sit there every day and go to trials and render verdicts, I wouldn't like that at all. So since we select juries from the people, and since my political philosophy is that there's a great deal of wisdom in the common people, I'll be honest with you, Sarge. I don't see how we could do any worse. William F. Buckley famously said he'd rather be governed by the first 450 names in the Boston phone book than by the faculty of Harvard, and I'm right with him on this one. You could make a fairly interesting case for. In fact, the more I think about it, the better I like it. You could select congressmen and women the same way that you select a jury. In other words, randomly bring people in, but at the same time, since you're randomly bringing in people, you can get some nuts and losers in there. So in the same way that they select a jury, if you were to just randomly select a pool of potential congresspeople, then the Republican Party and the Democrat Party would each have 5 vetoes or 6 or 8 or 10 or whatever. And they would have to look at the opposition, and you'd actually get a pretty good government that way, because all of the right-wing and left-wing raving lunatics would be dismissed by the other side. Michael Moore, thank you. Thank you for service. You can go home now, because we're not going to let you sit on this jury. And that's how juries are selected. It's actually a damn good system. You don't get to keep guessing. You don't get to keep picking forever. But when you panel a jury and you find out about them, the prosecution can identify people who are likely to be sympathetic to the criminal, and they want them off the jury. The defense can find people that are likely to be sympathetic to the prosecution, and they want them off the jury. And so you end up with a relatively fair, relatively balanced system. And for those of you who've ever been on a jury, nobody wants to be, I don't know anybody who wants to be on a jury. I've been on a jury 3 times. I've been a jury foreman once. Hey, greetings from Lithuania. Happy New Year to you too. DFRSS, differs. Lithuania, that just makes me so happy. It really does. Welcome. And greetings from the United States of America and from all the ships at sea. So I think if you randomly, I really think the only way you could get around the fact that the people who want to be politicians are the ones who should not be politicians is to randomly select people, and then have a process much like jury selection to make sure you got rid of the extremists and the people who couldn't read. I would certainly like to give that a try. Be nice to float that at a convention of the states, because the politicians are the problem. All politicians. Whenever you think about anything terrible that's happened, you can almost always, not in Obamacare, but almost always find bipartisan support for terrible, terrible, terrible policies. Moving on.